The crisp autumn air carried the scent of desperation as Matthew Sawyer stumbled through the tall prairie grass, his young son asleep in his arms, and his stomach growling louder than the wolves that howled in the distant hills. He hadn't eaten in 3 days, saving the last of their provisions for his boy, and Durango, Colorado seemed to stretch farther away with each painful step. The year was 1878, and the West had proven far less golden than the promises that had lured Matthew from Pennsylvania after his wife's passing. 6-year-old Thomas Tommy to his paw stirred against his chest, his small face pressed into Matthew's worn cotton shirt. The threadbare garment offered little protection against the early morning chill, but Matthew would sooner freeze than wake his boy to the harsh reality of their circumstances. "Almost there, Tommy," Matthew whispered, more to himself than to his sleeping child. "Just over that ridge, and we'll find work. We'll find home." The sun crept over the eastern horizon, painting the landscape in hues of amber and gold. Matthew adjusted his grip on Tommy, wincing as his calloused hands protested the movement. 3 months of searching for steady work had left him with nothing but a few coins jangling in his pocket and a growing sense of failure. His son deserved better than a life spent wandering from town to town, begging for scraps, and sleeping under the stars. As they crested the hill, Durango emerged in the valley below. The town wasn't large, nothing like Philadelphia, where Matthew had apprenticed as a carpenter before marrying and starting a family, but it bustled with morning activity. Smoke rose from chimneys, and horses were already hitched outside the general store. Matthew swallowed hard, hope and fear warring within him. "Pa," Tommy's sleepy voice broke through Matthew's thoughts. "Are we there yet?" "Yes, son." Matthew carefully set the boy on his feet, brushing dust from his small shoulders. "That's Durango down there. Remember what I told you?" Tommy nodded solemnly, his blue eyes so like his mother's, wide and trusting. "Best behavior. No asking for sweets." He paused, then added hopefully, "Unless someone offers." Despite everything, Matthew smiled. "That's right." He ruffled Tommy's sandy hair, so similar to his own. "Now, let's see about finding work and a place to stay." The walk into town took longer than expected, Tommy's short legs slowing their progress. By the time they reached the main street, the sun hung high in the sky, and Matthew's empty stomach had given up its protests, settling into a dull, constant ache. Durango was like many frontier towns Matthew had passed through, a mix of rough-hewn buildings and more established structures. A church steeple rose above the other rooftops, and the sound of a piano drifted from the saloon, despite the early hour. Matthew gripped Tommy's hand tighter as they passed the swinging doors, avoiding the curious glances of men already seeking solace in whiskey. Mr. Houghton might be hiring. A woman called from the boardwalk, noticing Matthew's weathered appearance and the tool belt slung over his shoulder. "Carpenter, ain't ya? He's building a new schoolhouse up on Pine Street." Matthew tipped his hat gratefully. "Thank you, madam." "Your boy looks hungry," she added, her eyes softening as she looked at Tommy. "Kitchen at the hotel sometimes needs help with dishes. They pay in meals." Matthew nodded again, relief washing over him. "Much obliged." Pine Street proved easy to find, and sure enough, the frame of a new building stood at its northern end. Several men worked on the structure, hammering and sawing in a rhythm that felt as familiar to Matthew as his own heartbeat. "You the foreman?" Matthew approached a barrel-chested man who seemed to be directing the others. The man turned, assessing Matthew with sharp eyes. "I am. Henry Houghton. You looking for work?" "Yes, sir." "Matthew Sawyer. I'm a carpenter by trade. Worked 4 years under master carpenter James Miller in Philadelphia before coming west." Houghton's eyebrows rose slightly. "Eastern training, eh? Let's see your hands." Matthew extended his palms, showing the calluses and scars that marked years of honest labor. Houghton grunted, apparently satisfied. "What about the boy?" He nodded toward Tommy, who stood quietly at Matthew's side. "My son. He's no trouble, sir. Knows to stay clear of work areas." Houghton considered for a moment, then nodded. $2 a day. We work sunup to sundown, with a break at noon. Start tomorrow. Can you handle that?" "Yes, sir." Matthew felt his shoulders relax slightly. "Thank you, sir. Got a place to stay?" Houghton asked, already turning back to his work. "Not yet, sir. Widow Sullivan rents rooms above the laundry. Reasonable rates." Houghton pointed down the street. Tell her I sent you." With the promise of work secured, Matthew led Tommy toward the laundry, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in weeks. The laundry was easy to spot. White sheets flapped in the breeze behind a modest building with a hand-painted sign. "Wait here a moment, Tommy," Matthew said, positioning his son on a bench outside. "I'll see about a room." The laundry smelled of soap and steam, and a young woman looked up from a tub of clothes as Matthew entered. "Can I help you, sir? I'm looking for Widow Sullivan. Mr. Houghton sent me about a room." "Oh, that would be Mrs. Sullivan upstairs. Through that door and up the steps." Matthew thanked her and followed the directions, climbing a narrow staircase that opened onto a small landing. He knocked on the door at the top. "Coming," a voice called from inside. The door swung open to reveal a woman perhaps a few years older than Matthew's 32 years. She had dark hair pulled back in a simple bun and wore a plain dress with an apron tied around her waist. Her most striking feature, however, was her eyes, deep brown and shadowed with a sorrow that Matthew recognized all too well. "Mrs. Sullivan?" he asked, removing his hat. "Henry Houghton suggested I inquire about a room. I'm starting work on the schoolhouse tomorrow." The widow studied him for a moment. "You're new to Durango?" "Yes, madam. Just arrived today with my son. He's waiting downstairs." Something in her expression softened. "A child? How old?" "6, madam." She seemed to make a decision. "I have one room available. $4 a week, includes clean linens and water for washing. No cooking in the rooms, but there's a common kitchen at the end of the hall." Matthew hesitated. The rate was fair, but until he received his first pay, $4 might as well have been 40. He had exactly $2.17 to his name, enough for a few days' food, but not much else. Mrs. Sullivan must have read the conflict on his face. "First week in advance," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I understand, madam. I'll need to make other arrangements until payday." She nodded, unsurprised. "The livery sometimes lets men sleep in the hayloft for a few cents a night." "Thank you for your time," Matthew said, replacing his hat and turning to go. "Wait." Mrs. Sullivan's voice stopped him. "Is your boy hungry?" Matthew's pride warred with the reality of Tommy's empty stomach. "We'll manage, madam. I have stew on the stove. More than I can eat alone." She paused, then added, "No charge. Consider it a welcome to Durango." The kindness in her eyes nearly undid him. "That's very generous, but I insist." Her tone brooked no argument. "Fetch your son and come back up. The stew will be on the table." Matthew found himself nodding. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan." "Naomi," she said. "Naomi Sullivan." "Matthew Sawyer, madam." He hesitated, then added, "And my boy is Thomas." "Tommy. Well, Matthew Sawyer, go get Tommy before the stew gets cold." When Matthew returned with Tommy, Naomi Sullivan had indeed set a modest table with 3 bowls of fragrant stew. The small apartment was neat and sparsely furnished, but homey touches: a patchwork quilt draped over a chair, a vase of wildflowers on the windowsill spoke of a woman who cared about creating a home. "Madam," Tommy said politely as Matthew introduced them, "your house smells real nice." A genuine smile transformed Naomi's face, erasing years of hardship. "Thank you, Tommy. It's the stew, my husband's recipe. Sit down, both of you." They took their places at the table, and Matthew noticed a third setting. "Is someone joining us?" A shadow passed over Naomi's features. "No. Old habit, I suppose." She quickly removed the extra bowl and spoon. "Please, eat while it's hot." Tommy needed no further encouragement, diving into the stew with enthusiasm. Matthew ate more slowly, savoring each bite of the hearty meal. Vegetables and tender meat swam in a rich broth that tasted of herbs and home. "This is delicious, Mrs. Sullivan," Matthew said after his first few bites. "Naomi, please." She watched them eat with quiet satisfaction. "And thank you. Frank, my husband, taught me to cook when we first married. He always said food tastes better when made with love." He was right, Matthew agreed, noticing she barely touched her own meal. "You're not eating?" Naomi shrugged. "I had a late breakfast." Something about her demeanor made Matthew suspect she was lying, but it wasn't his place to question her. They ate in companionable silence for a while, Tommy occasionally piping up with observations about Durango or questions about their new surroundings. "How long have you been in Durango, Naomi?" Matthew asked as he mopped up the last of his stew with a piece of bread. 3 years. Frank and I came from Missouri after the war. He built this place, the laundry downstairs, apartments up here. Pride colored her voice. He was a fine carpenter, like yourself. Was? Matthew asked gently, though he already suspected the answer. Pneumonia took him last winter. Naomi's hands twisted in her apron. It was quick, at least. I'm sorry for your loss. Matthew's words felt inadequate, but he knew from experience that nothing truly helped. My wife, Rebecca, passed 3 years ago. Childbirth. Naomi's eyes met his, recognition of shared grief passing between them. The baby? Matthew shook his head. We lost them both. I'm real sorry about your mama, Tommy said suddenly to Naomi, his small face solemn. My ma's in heaven too. Pa says she's watching over us, though. I believe that's true, Naomi said softly. And I think your ma would be very proud of what a polite young man you are. Tommy beamed at the compliment. Pa taught me manners. He says they don't cost nothing but make folks feel rich. Matthew felt a flush of embarrassment and pride. Tommy remembers everything I say, apparently. A wise child, Naomi observed with a smile, and a credit to his father's teaching. As the meal concluded, Matthew helped clear the table despite Naomi's protests. Tommy, full and content, sat quietly looking through a picture book Naomi had produced from a small bookshelf. You really didn't need to do this, Matthew said as he dried a bowl. But I'm grateful. It's been a while since Tommy had a proper meal. I'm happy to help, Naomi replied, her hands moving efficiently through the washing. The West can be unforgiving to newcomers. That it can. Matthew hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about your room for rent. Once I get paid, if it's still available, it will be, Naomi assured him. Until then. She paused, seeming to debate with herself. The storeroom off the kitchen has a cot. It's small but clean. You and Tommy could stay there until you get on your feet. No charge. Matthew stared at her, stunned by the offer. Mrs. Sullivan, Naomi, I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition if I'm offering. Her tone was firm. Consider it a loan. You can repay me once you're established. Why would you help strangers this way? Matthew couldn't help but ask. Naomi's expression grew distant. When Frank and I first arrived in Durango, we had nothing but each other and his tools. A family took us in until we could afford our own place. She met his gaze steadily. I'm simply passing on the kindness we received. Matthew wanted to refuse, to insist they would manage on their own, but Tommy's sleeping face as the boy dozed over his book made the decision for him. Thank you, Naomi. We accept your generous offer, but only until my first payday. Naomi nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. Of course. That night, lying on the narrow cot with Tommy curled against him, Matthew stared at the ceiling and thought about Naomi Sullivan. There was something about her, a quiet strength, a dignity that transcended her circumstances. She reminded him, in some ways, of Rebecca, though the two women looked nothing alike. Perhaps it was the kindness, the willingness to help others even when her own situation was far from ideal. Matthew had noticed the sparse pantry when he helped in the kitchen, had seen the careful way Naomi portioned her own meal to make it appear she was eating more than she was. The widow was struggling, yet she had shared what little she had with strangers. We'll repay her kindness, he whispered to the sleeping Tommy. Somehow. The next morning, Matthew rose before dawn, careful not to wake Tommy. He left a note explaining he'd gone to work and slipped out into the crisp morning air. Before heading to the schoolhouse construction site, he made a detour to the general store, which was just opening its doors. Morning, the shopkeeper greeted him. Early bird, aren't you? Need to make a purchase before work, Matthew explained. What's your best price on a side of bacon and a dozen eggs? The shopkeeper named a sum that would leave Matthew with barely enough for a loaf of bread, but he nodded acceptance. I'll take them. With his purchases carefully wrapped, Matthew returned to Naomi's building and left the parcel outside her door with a simple note. A small repayment for your kindness. Matthew. Work at the schoolhouse was grueling but satisfying. Henry Houghton proved to be a demanding but fair foreman, and he nodded approvingly at Matthew's skilled hands and attention to detail. Eastern training shows, he commented as Matthew precisely joined two beams. Most men out here learn by doing, not proper apprenticeship. I was fortunate, Matthew acknowledged, driving a nail home with one clean strike. Master Miller was exacting but thorough. "Why'd you leave Philadelphia?" Houghton asked during their midday break, passing Matthew a canteen of water. "Seems a man with your skills would prosper there." Matthew took a long drink before answering. "After my wife died, the city held too many memories. Tommy and I needed a fresh start." Houghton nodded, understanding without need for further explanation. "Well, Durango could use more skilled craftsmen. School's just the beginning, town's growing fast." The conversation gave Matthew hope that perhaps, finally, they had found a place to settle. When the day ended, his muscles aching pleasantly from honest work, he collected his pay for the day, $2 that felt like a fortune after months of scarcity, and headed back to Naomi's. He found Tommy in the common kitchen, standing on a chair beside Naomi as she taught him to roll out dough for biscuits. The boy's face and clothes were dusted with flour, but his smile was brighter than Matthew had seen in months. "Pa," Tommy exclaimed when he spotted Matthew. "Mrs. Naomi's teaching me to cook. I made biscuits all by myself. Did you now?" Matthew ruffled his son's hair, adding more flour to the mess. "Fine-looking biscuits they are, too. They're for supper," Tommy informed him importantly. "And Mrs. Naomi said the bacon and eggs you brought made the best breakfast she's had in ages." Matthew's eyes met Naomi's over Tommy's head. "You didn't have to share with him." "Nonsense," Naomi replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "Tommy's been a wonderful helper today. Helped me sort laundry and delivered Mrs. Peterson's clean tablecloths without a single wrinkle." Her expression softened. "He's a joy to have around." "Still, I didn't mean for you to watch him all day," Matthew said, guilt creeping in. "I should have made other arrangements." "Actually," Naomi said hesitantly, "I have a proposition for you." She gestured for Matthew to sit at the small table while Tommy continued to shape biscuits with intense concentration. "I've been thinking," she began, joining Matthew at the table. "The laundry business is growing, but it's becoming too much for me to handle alone. I've been considering hiring help, but good help is expensive." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "What if, instead of paying rent for the room, you allowed Tommy to stay with me during working hours? I'd teach him his letters and numbers. I was a schoolteacher back in Missouri, and he could help with small tasks. In exchange, you'd have the room and meals included." Matthew stared at her, processing the offer. "Naomi, that's far too generous. The room alone is worth more than Tommy's company, pleasant as it is." "Not to me," she said quietly. "Since Frank died." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "The house is too quiet. Having Tommy around today reminded me how much I miss teaching, how much I miss." She didn't finish the thought, but Matthew understood. She missed having a family. Besides, Naomi continued more briskly, "In a year or so, Tommy will be old enough for proper schooling. This arrangement wouldn't be forever." Matthew glanced at his son, who was placing biscuits carefully on a baking sheet, his small face a study in concentration. The boy needed stability, a home, perhaps even a motherly influence that Matthew, try as he might, couldn't provide alone. "What do you think, Tommy?" he asked. "Would you like to stay with Mrs. Naomi while I'm working, learn your letters and such?" Tommy looked up, flour smudged across his cheek. "Yes, please. Mrs. Naomi has books with pictures, and she said she'd teach me to write my name." The decision, it seemed, was made. "Then we accept your offer, Naomi, with gratitude. But I insist on contributing what I can: firewood, repairs around the house, whatever needs doing." Relief and something like joy crossed Naomi's face. "That would be most welcome." She rose from the table, businesslike again. "Now, supper will be ready soon. Tommy, shall we show your father how to set a proper table?" The next weeks fell into a rhythm that began to feel like normal life. Matthew worked on the schoolhouse 6 days a week, his skills earning him respect among the other builders and occasional offers for side jobs repairing furniture or building cabinets for Durango's residents. Tommy thrived under Naomi's gentle guidance, advancing quickly in his letters and developing a love for books that delighted both adults. Matthew spent his evenings and Sundays making improvements around Naomi's building, fixing loose floorboards, repairing a leaky roof, building shelves for her laundry supplies. He told himself it was simply repayment for her generosity, but he couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt when she praised his work, or the warmth that spread through him when her fingers brushed his as she handed him a cup of coffee. October gave way to November, and the air grew sharper with approaching winter. Durango prepared for the season, storing provisions and reinforcing structures against snow and wind. The schoolhouse neared completion, prompting Matthew to worry about future employment, but Houghton assured him there would be more work. Town councils approved funds for a new jailhouse come spring, the foreman told him. Sheriff's been complaining about the old one for years. I'll need good men for that job. The news eased Matthew's immediate concerns, but the uncertain nature of construction work still nagged at him. One harsh winter, one economic downturn, and he and Tommy could be back where they started, homeless and hungry. His worries came to a head one evening in late November when he returned from work to find Naomi and Tommy baking pies for Thanksgiving. The domestic seen his son laughing as Naomi showed him how to crimp dough edges. The warm scent of cinnamon and apples filling the kitchen struck him with such longing that he had to turn away for a moment to compose himself. "Matthew." Naomi's voice pulled him back. "Is everything all right?" He forced a smile. "Just tired." The rafters on the bell tower were trickier than expected. Naomi didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. "Wash up for supper." Tommy's made venison stew all by himself well, with a bit of guidance. Later, after Tommy had gone to bed, Matthew found Naomi darning socks by lamplight in the common room. He hesitated in the doorway, watching her nimble fingers work the needle through worn fabric. "You can come in," she said without looking up. "I don't bite." Matthew chuckled and took the chair opposite hers. "I've been meaning to thank you properly for all you've done for Tommy and me. We were in dire straits when we arrived, and your kindness, well, it made all the difference." Naomi set her darning aside, meeting his gaze directly. "You've more than repaid any kindness with your work around the building. The laundry hasn't run this smoothly since Frank was alive to keep the equipment in good repair." "Still," Matthew persisted, "you took a chance on strangers, shared your home, your food." He trailed off, uncertain how to express the depth of his gratitude. "Perhaps I saw something of myself in you," Naomi admitted softly. "When Frank died, I was adrift. If not for the kindness of neighbors, I might have lost everything." She picked up her darning again, her eyes downcast. "Besides, Tommy reminds me of what might have been." The quiet confession hung in the air between them. Matthew waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "Frank and I wanted children," Naomi continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "We tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be. Then Frank got sick, and—" She shook her head, as if dispelling painful memories. "Having Tommy here has been a joy I'd forgotten was possible." "He adores you," Matthew said gently. "Talks about Mrs. Naomi constantly. He's learning more from you than he ever did from me on the trail." A small smile curved Naomi's lips. "He's a bright boy, quick to learn, eager to please. You've raised him well, despite difficult circumstances." "I've done my best," Matthew acknowledged. "But a boy needs more than what a drifting father can provide. He needs stability, community." He hesitated, then added, "A mother's influence wouldn't hurt, either." Naomi's hand stilled, her eyes lifting to meet his. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of possibilities neither had dared consider before. The moment was broken by a sharp knock at the front door downstairs. Naomi frowned, setting aside her darning. Who could that be at this hour? Matthew rose. "I'll go. Stay here." He descended the stairs and opened the door to find Henry Houghton standing on the porch, hat in hand, and concern etched on his weathered face. "Evening, Sawyer. Sorry to disturb, but there's trouble brewing. Thought you should know, living here with the widow and all." Matthew stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "What sort of trouble?" "James Blackwell's back in town." Houghton's voice was grim. "Saw him ride in an hour ago, headed straight for the saloon." The name meant nothing to Matthew. "Should that concern me?" "Not you directly, but Mrs. Sullivan." Houghton glanced up at the lit window. Blackwell was Frank Sullivan's business partner before Frank died. Word is, he thought he'd inherit the laundry business when Frank passed, maybe marry the widow too. When Naomi refused both offers, he left town in a rage. A cold feeling settled in Matthew's stomach. And now he's back, 3 sheets to the wind and making threats, according to Sheriff Miller. Saying the laundry rightfully belongs to him, that Frank promised him. Houghton shook his head. "No proof, of course, but Blackwell's not known for his reasonable nature. Sheriff's keeping an eye on him for now, but thought Mrs. Sullivan should be warned. Thank you for letting us know, Matthew said, mind already racing with implications. I'll make sure Naomi's aware. Good man. Houghton clapped him on the shoulder. Sheriff said he'd stop by in the morning to discuss precautions. Until then, might be wise to keep doors locked. After Houghton left, Matthew returned upstairs to find Naomi waiting anxiously. What is it? You look troubled. Matthew repeated Houghton's warning, watching Naomi's face pale as he mentioned Blackwell's name. James, she whispered, sinking into a chair. I hoped never to hear that name again. Houghton said he was Frank's partner? Yes, though partner suggests a quality Frank never intended. Naomi's hands twisted in her lap. James invested some money in the laundry when we first opened, but Frank bought him out before he died. James refused to accept it, claimed Frank had promised him the business and me if anything happened. Her voice hardened. Frank would never have done such a thing. He knew what kind of man James was. What kind of man is he? Matthew asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Cruel. Possessive. Naomi's eyes darkened with memory. He asked me to marry him 2 weeks after Frank's funeral. When I refused, he became unpleasant. Threatened to burn down the laundry if I didn't reconsider. Anger rose in Matthew's chest. Did he hurt you? No. Sheriff Miller intervened, and James left town. Naomi looked up at Matthew, fear evident in her eyes. If he's back and making threats, I'll sleep downstairs tonight, Matthew said firmly. Tommy's safer up here with you. I'll keep watch. Naomi started to protest, then stopped, nodding instead. Thank you, Matthew. I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here. The simple admission warmed something in Matthew's heart. Even as concern for her safety hardened his resolve. True to his word, Sheriff Miller arrived early the next morning. A tall man with a silver-streaked beard and the weathered look of someone who had seen his share of frontier justice. He listened carefully as Naomi recounted her history with James Blackwell. I'll have deputies keep an eye on the place, Miller promised. But I can't arrest the man for drinking and making idle threats. Not until he does something actionable. Understood, Sheriff, Matthew said, standing protectively near Naomi. We'll be vigilant. After the sheriff left, Matthew reluctantly prepared for work. I don't like leaving you and Tommy alone. We'll be fine, Naomi assured him, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. The laundry girls will be here all day, and Sheriff Miller promised to check in regularly. Matthew hesitated, then reached for her hand. If anything happens, anything at all, send word to the schoolhouse. I'll come immediately. Naomi's fingers tightened around his. I will. Throughout the day, Matthew found it difficult to concentrate on his work. Twice he nearly injured himself with careless mistakes, earning a concerned look from Houghton. Go home, Sawyer. The foreman finally said mid-afternoon. Your mind's not here, and I need all limbs intact. Check on your family. Make sure they're safe. Matthew didn't correct Houghton's assumption that Naomi and Tommy were his family. In many ways, it felt true, despite the unconventional nature of their arrangement. As he approached the laundry, relief washed over him at the sight of business proceeding as usual. Women hung sheets on lines behind the building, and the familiar sounds of scrubbing and chatter drifted through the open windows. Matthew entered through the back door, nodding to the laundry girls as he passed. He found Naomi in her small office, Tommy sitting nearby practicing his letters. Pa! Tommy exclaimed, jumping up to greet him. You're home early. Finished the roof trusses ahead of schedule. Matthew lied smoothly, not wanting to worry the boy. His eyes sought Naomi's. Everything quiet here. She nodded, understanding his real question. Not a sign of him. That evening, after Tommy was asleep, Matthew built up the fire in the common room and joined Naomi for what had become their nightly ritual quiet conversation as she sewed and he whittled or repaired household items. Perhaps he's left town already, Naomi suggested hopefully, threading a needle by the firelight. Or the sheriff warned him off. Perhaps, Matthew agreed, though he doubted it. Men like Blackwell, fueled by entitlement and resentment, rarely gave up so easily. Still, I'll sleep downstairs again tonight, just to be safe. Naomi set her sewing aside. Matthew, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have mentioned earlier. The serious tone of her voice alarmed him. What is it? When Frank died, he left some debts. She didn't meet Matthew's eyes. The laundry was just getting established, and we'd invested heavily in equipment. I've been paying them off gradually, but Blackwell holds some of those debts, Matthew guessed, the pieces falling into place. Naomi nodded. The largest portion. He offered to forgive the debt if I married him. When I refused, he gave me 1 year to pay in full. That year ends next month. How much do you owe him? $300. Naomi's voice was barely audible. I've saved nearly half, but with winter coming and business slowing. Matthew whistled softly. $300 was a substantial sum more than he could hope to save in a month of construction work. Have you approached the bank about a loan? They refused without a male co-signer. Bitterness tinged her words. Apparently, a widow running a business is too great a risk. I could co-sign, Matthew offered immediately. I have steady work, good prospects with the new jailhouse project. No, Naomi interrupted gently. I couldn't ask that of you. If something went wrong, you and Tommy would be liable. Then we'll find another way, Matthew insisted. Perhaps Sheriff Miller could intervene, negotiate an extension. Perhaps, Naomi agreed, though she didn't sound convinced. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. Matthew reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. Your problems became mine the moment you shared your home and heart with Tommy and me. The words hung in the air between them, revealing more than he had intended. Naomi's eyes widened slightly, her fingers tightening around his. Matthew, whatever she had been about to say, was lost in a sudden crash from downstairs, followed by the sound of breaking glass. They both froze, listening as heavy footsteps stumbled through the laundry below. Sullivan, a slurred voice bellowed. Where are you hiding, woman? We have business to discuss. Naomi's face drained of color. James, she whispered. Matthew was on his feet instantly. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. He grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace, the closest thing to a weapon at hand. Matthew, no, he's dangerous. Naomi clutched at his arm. Let's send for the sheriff. No time, Matthew replied grimly. He's already inside, and Tommy's sleeping just down the hall. He gently disengaged her grip. Lock the door, Naomi. Heart pounding, Matthew descended the stairs as quietly as possible. The laundry was dark, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the windows and the faint glow of a lantern carried by the intruder. Sullivan, the voice called again, closer now. Time to settle our accounts. Matthew moved silently through the shadows, following the bobbing lantern light. He found its bearer in the main washing room, a barrel-chested man with a wild beard and bloodshot eyes, swaying slightly as he peered into corners and behind washing tubs. Blackwell, Matthew called, stepping into the lantern's glow. You're trespassing. Get out before I throw you out. The man whirled, nearly losing his balance. His eyes narrowed as he took in Matthew's presence. Who the hell are you? A friend of Mrs. Sullivan's. One who doesn't appreciate drunks breaking into her property in the middle of the night. Blackwell spat on the floor. Property that should have been mine. Frank promised me. Frank Sullivan bought you out before he died. Matthew interrupted, advancing slowly. You have no claim here. Leave now, and we won't involve the sheriff. Won't involve, Blackwell broke off with a harsh laugh. You think I'm afraid of Miller? Man's all talk. He set the lantern down on a table, freeing both hands. Now, you listen here. That woman upstairs owes me money. $300 plus interest. I've come to collect. She has until the end of December, Matthew said evenly, noting the way Blackwell's right hand drifted toward his belt. That was the agreement. Agreements changed, Blackwell snarled. I need that money now, and if she can't pay. His mouth twisted into an ugly smile. Well, there are other ways to settle debts. The implication sent a surge of rage through Matthew. He tightened his grip on the poker. Touch her, and it'll be the last thing you ever do. Something in his tone must have penetrated Blackwell's drunken haze. The man's eyes narrowed, assessing Matthew with newfound caution. You sweet on her? Think you're going to step into Frank's shoes? He laughed again, the sound ugly and mocking. Naomi's too fine a woman for the likes of you, Drifter. What can you offer her? A life of poverty. Another man's brat to raise? Matthew's knuckles whitened around the poker, but he kept his voice steady. What I can offer is none of your concern. Now, for the last time, get out. Instead of retreating, Blackwell reached behind him and produced a revolver from his waistband. I don't take orders from squatters in my property, he slurred, pointing the weapon unsteadily at Matthew's chest. Matthew froze, calculating his options. The distance between them was too great to rush Blackwell before he could fire, and the man, despite his drunkenness, looked capable of hitting his target at this range. This isn't your property, a clear voice spoke from the stairs. Naomi stood there, a shotgun braced against her shoulder, aimed directly at Blackwell. And you're not welcome here, James. Not now, not ever. Naomi. Blackwell's tone shifted, becoming wheedling. Don't be like that. We had an agreement you're trying to break by coming here a month early, she interrupted, descending the remaining stairs with the shotgun steady in her hands. Now lower your weapon and leave, or I'll show you just how much Frank taught me about handling this shotgun. For a tense moment, Blackwell seemed to consider his options, his revolver still pointed at Matthew. Then, slowly, a cruel smile spread across his face. You won't shoot me, Naomi. You haven't got the stomach for it. He took an unsteady step forward. Besides, if I'm dead, who'll forgive your debt? You'll lose the laundry for sure then. I'd rather lose the laundry than lose my self-respect by giving in to you, Naomi replied, her voice remarkably steady. Now lower your gun and go. Matthew watched the standoff with mounting tension, ready to move the instant an opportunity presented itself. He caught Naomi's eye briefly, saw her almost imperceptible nod toward a large washbasin to his right. Understanding flashed between them. Matthew shifted his weight slightly, preparing. Last chance, James, Naomi warned, her finger visibly tightening on the trigger. Blackwell sneered, his gun hand wavering slightly. You're bluffing. In one fluid motion, Matthew kicked the heavy washbasin toward Blackwell's legs while diving to the side. Water and suds splashed across the floor as the basin collided with Blackwell's knees, throwing him off balance. His revolver discharged with a deafening roar, the bullet embedding itself harmlessly in the ceiling. Before Blackwell could recover, Matthew was on him, wrestling for control of the weapon. They crashed into a table, sending it toppling as they grappled. Blackwell was heavier and fueled by whiskey courage, but Matthew had the advantage of sobriety and desperate determination. Stop it, both of you, Naomi shouted, unable to get a clear shot as the men struggled on the floor. The revolver discharged again, the shot going wild as Matthew wrenched Blackwell's wrist. With a final surge of strength, Matthew slammed the man's hand against the floorboards, forcing him to release the weapon. It skittered away across the wet floor. Blackwell, disarmed but not defeated, landed a solid punch to Matthew's jaw that sent stars exploding across his vision. Matthew retaliated with a blow to Blackwell's midsection that drove the air from the larger man's lungs. As they continued to trade blows, the door to the laundry burst open, and Sheriff Miller rushed in, deputy close behind. That's enough. Miller's authoritative voice cut through the chaos. He aimed his revolver at the struggling men. Break it up, or I'll shoot the next man who throws a punch. Matthew immediately released his hold on Blackwell and rolled away, breathing hard. Blackwell, slower to obey, made one last lunge before the deputy restrained him. He broke in. Naomi explained rapidly, lowering the shotgun as the sheriff took control of the situation. Threatened us with that revolver. She pointed to the weapon lying near a washing tub. Miller nodded, gesturing for his deputy to secure Blackwell. Figured as much when we heard the shots. Mrs. Peterson across the street saw the commotion and fetched us. As the deputy hauled a cursing Blackwell to his feet, Matthew stood shakily, wiping blood from a split lip. He mentioned something about needing money right away. Changed the terms of their agreement. That right, Blackwell? Miller asked, collecting the discarded revolver. She owes me, Blackwell snarled, struggling against the deputy's grip. $300, and I need it now. What you need is a night in jail to sober up, Miller replied evenly. Breaking and entering, threatening folks with a firearm, that's enough to keep you locked up for quite a while. He turned to Naomi. Mrs. Sullivan, would you be willing to press charges? Naomi hesitated, glancing at Matthew before answering. Yes, Sheriff, I would. No. Blackwell's face contorted with rage. You can't do this to me. I'll burn this place to the ground before I let you. Add threats of arson to the charges, Jenkins, Miller instructed his deputy wearily. Let's get him to the jail before he adds anything else to his sentence. As the lawman dragged Blackwell away, his threats and curses fading into the night, Matthew sagged against a washing table, the adrenaline draining from his system. Are you hurt? Naomi asked, setting the shotgun aside and rushing to examine his injuries. Nothing serious. Matthew winced as her fingers gently probed his jaw. You? And Tommy? Both fine. Tommy slept through it all, thank heaven. Her hands trembled slightly as she examined a cut over his eyebrow. You could have been killed, Matthew. If that shot had, but it didn't. He interrupted gently, catching her hands in his. We're safe. That's what matters. For a long moment, they stood close together in the wreckage of the laundry room, the reality of what had nearly happened settling over them. Then, without warning, Naomi stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Matthew's waist, pressing her face against his chest. Thank you, she whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. For protecting us. For being here. Matthew hesitated only a moment before enfolding her in his arms, resting his cheek against her hair. Always, he promised softly. Always. The aftermath of Blackwell's intrusion brought unexpected developments. Sheriff Miller, concerned about further trouble, assigned a deputy to patrol near the laundry for the next several nights. The town, hearing of Blackwell's threats and Matthew's defense of the widow, rallied around them. Women from Naomi's church brought food and offers of help with the laundry. Men from the construction crew volunteered to repair the damage to the washing room and install stronger locks on the doors and windows. Even the banker, Mr. Harrison, paid a visit, expressing concern about the incident and, more surprisingly, interest in discussing Naomi's financial situation. Community's taken quite a shine to you, Sawyer, Houghton commented as they worked on the schoolhouse bell tower. Standing up to Blackwell, like that folks respect a man who protects his own. Matthew, hammering a nail into place, paused. Naomi's not mine, he corrected, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. Houghton raised an eyebrow. Could have fooled me. And the rest of Durango, for that matter. Before Matthew could respond, another worker called up from below. Sawyer, got a visitor. Matthew looked down to see Tommy running across the schoolyard, Naomi following at a more sedate pace with a basket over her arm. He climbed down the ladder, brushing sawdust from his clothes as Tommy barreled into him. Pa, Mrs. Naomi, and I brought you lunch. The boy announced proudly. I helped make the sandwiches all by myself. Did you now? Matthew ruffled his son's hair, smiling at Naomi as she approached. This is a pleasant surprise. Tommy insisted. Naomi explained, her cheeks slightly flushed. And it seemed a shame to waste such a beautiful day indoors. The bruises on Matthew's face had faded to yellowish smudges, but Naomi's gaze still lingered on them with concern. For days had passed since Blackwell's attack, and though the man remained in jail, his threats cast a shadow over their peace of mind. Join us for lunch. Matthew invited the other workers, but Houghton shook his head. You enjoy your family meal, Sawyer. We'll take our break when you return. There was again the assumption that they were a family. Matthew didn't correct him this time, instead leading Naomi and Tommy to a grassy spot beneath a cottonwood tree. As they spread the blanket and unpacked the food, Matthew marveled at how natural it felt, this simple domestic act shared with Naomi and his son. Tommy chattered about his morning lessons. Naomi smiled indulgently, and for a moment, Matthew could almost believe this was truly his life, not a temporary arrangement born of necessity and kindness. Oh, Naomi suddenly remembered something, reaching into her basket. I nearly forgot. Mr. Harrison from the bank sent a message. She handed Matthew a folded paper. He wants to meet with both of us tomorrow morning. Matthew frowned, unfolding the note. Both of us? What about? He didn't say exactly, but Naomi hesitated. I think it might concern Blackwell's loan. The sheriff mentioned something about reviewing the legal status of debts incurred through coercion. Hope flickered in Matthew's chest. That would be a blessing indeed. Yes, well. Naomi busied herself cutting an apple into slices for Tommy. I try not to hope too much where James is concerned. He has a way of turning situations to his advantage. Not this time, Matthew said firmly, reaching across the blanket to take her hand. Not anymore, Naomi. You're not alone in this. Her eyes met his. Gratitude and something deeper reflected in their brown depths. No, she agreed softly. I'm not alone anymore. The banker's news the next morning exceeded their most optimistic hopes. Mr. Harrison, a precise man with spectacles and a neat beard, explained that upon review of the documents, Blackwell's claim was legally questionable at best. Frank Sullivan paid the agreed buyout price in full, Harrison explained, showing them the ledger entries. Blackwell's additional loan appears to have been made after the fact, with terms that would not stand up to legal scrutiny. The interest alone would be considered usurious. Are you saying I don't owe him the money? Naomi asked, hardly daring to believe it. Harrison adjusted his spectacles. I'm saying that if this matter went before a judge, Blackwell would likely lose his claim entirely. However, to avoid further unpleasantness, I would suggest a settlement. He looked at Matthew. With your permission, Mr. Sawyer, I could negotiate with Blackwell on Mrs. Sullivan's behalf. Offer perhaps $50 to relinquish all claims and stay away from Durango permanently. My permission? Matthew echoed, puzzled. Harrison blinked, equally confused. As Mrs. Sullivan's protector. I assumed you had an interest in the matter. Matthew has been invaluable to me. Naomi interjected smoothly. But the decision is mine to make. She straightened in her chair. And I agree to your suggestion, Mr. Harrison. $50 to be free of James Blackwell forever seems a bargain indeed. The banker nodded, respect evident in his expression. Very well, Mrs. Sullivan. I'll speak with Sheriff Miller about approaching Blackwell with the offer. As they left the bank, Matthew couldn't help but notice the lightness in Naomi's step, the way her shoulders had straightened, unburdened from the weight of Blackwell's threats. $50, she mused as they walked back toward the laundry. I can manage that easily, especially with business picking up for the holidays. I could contribute, Matthew offered. To be rid of Blackwell, no. Naomi interrupted gently. You've done more than enough already, Matthew. This is my burden to resolve. She paused, then added, though I'm grateful beyond words for your support. They walked in companionable silence for a moment, Matthew wrestling with thoughts that had been growing increasingly insistent over the past days. Naomi, he finally said, I've been thinking about our arrangement. Her steps faltered slightly. Oh, with the schoolhouse nearly complete and Blackwell hopefully out of the picture soon. He hesitated, uncertain how to express what he wanted to say. I'm wondering what comes next for us. For Tommy and me. Naomi stopped walking entirely, turning to face him on the boardwalk. Several passers-by nodded greetings, which she acknowledged absently, her attention fixed on Matthew. What are you asking exactly? Matthew took a deep breath. I'm asking if you'd like us to stay. Not as boarders or as part of some bargain, but because. He faltered, then forced himself to continue. Because I believe we could build something good together, the three of us. Naomi's eyes widened, color rising in her cheeks. Matthew, are you not proposing marriage? He clarified hastily. Not yet. That would be presumptuous, given how short a time we've known each other. He smiled ruefully. But I am proposing possibility. A chance to see if what I feel for you, what I believe you might feel for me, could grow into something lasting. For a long, heart-stopping moment, Naomi didn't respond. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, transforming her features with joy. I would like that very much, she said softly. To explore possibilities. Relief and happiness surged through Matthew. He resisted the urge to embrace her on the public street, settling instead for taking her hand briefly in his. Then we'll stay, and we'll see where this path leads us. Together, Naomi added, her smile deepening. Together, Matthew agreed. Thanksgiving arrived with a dusting of early snow that transformed Durango into a scene from a storybook. The schoolhouse, completed the day before the holiday, stood ready to welcome students after the new year. Matthew, with a permanent position secured on Houghton's crew for the jailhouse project, faced the future with newfound confidence. Blackwell, confronted with the banker's evidence and legal threats, had grudgingly accepted the $50 settlement in exchange for signing away all claims against Naomi or her property. The sheriff had escorted him to the stagecoach with a stern warning never to return to Durango. With these shadows lifted, the Thanksgiving feast Naomi prepared felt truly celebratory. She had invited several friends, the Houghtons, Sheriff Miller and his wife, two elderly sisters who lived nearby, making the small apartment warm with company and conversation. Tommy, dressed in his best clothes and bursting with importance, helped serve cranberry sauce he had made with Naomi's guidance. Matthew, watching his son move comfortably among their guests, felt a swell of gratitude so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. "He's flourishing," Mrs. Houghton commented, following Matthew's gaze. "Children need a mother's touch. You've done well to find Naomi." "I didn't find her," Matthew corrected gently. "She found us when we needed her most." Later, after the guests had departed and Tommy had fallen asleep, stuffed with turkey and pie, Matthew and Naomi sat before the fire in the common room, enjoying a rare moment of peaceful solitude. "That was the finest Thanksgiving I can remember," Matthew said, watching the firelight play across Naomi's features. Tommy never had a proper holiday celebration before. His mother died before he was old enough to remember such things. Naomi's expression softened with sympathy. "You must have loved her very much." "I did," Matthew acknowledged. "Rebecca was my first love, the mother of my child. I'll always honor her memory." He paused, gathering his courage. "But I've discovered the heart has an extraordinary capacity for new beginnings." Their eyes met in the flickering light, understanding passing between them. "When Frank died," Naomi said quietly, "I thought my chance at happiness died with him. I couldn't imagine loving anyone else." She reached across the space between their chairs, her fingers finding Matthew's. "I was wrong." Matthew entwined his fingers with hers, marveling at how right it felt. "Naomi Sullivan, I find myself falling in love with you. Not to replace what was lost, but to build something new. Something worthy of the good people we've loved and lost." Tears glistened in Naomi's eyes, but her smile was radiant. "I feel the same, Matthew Sawyer. Against all expectations, against all my careful plans to protect my heart, I find myself in love with you. And with that wonderful boy of yours." Matthew raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then perhaps my earlier talk of possibilities was too cautious. Perhaps what I should have said was that I see a future with you a lifetime, if you'll have us." "Are you proposing now, Matthew?" Naomi asked, her voice soft with wonder. "I believe I am," he answered, suddenly certain. "Not because of convenience or gratitude, but because loving you feels like coming home after a long, difficult journey." He slid from his chair to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Naomi Sullivan, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Of making a family with Tommy and me?" Naomi's free hand came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with tenderness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Matthew. I would be honored to be your wife, to be Tommy's mother, to build a life together." He rose just enough to gather her into his arms, their first kiss sealed in the firelight, gentle at first, then deepening with the promise of all they would share. When they finally parted, Naomi rested her forehead against his, eyes closed in contentment. "When I offered you and Tommy that first meal, I never imagined where it would lead." Matthew smiled, remembering that day, how desperate he had been, how generously she had given when she had so little herself. "You offered us food when we were starving," he said softly. "In return, I offer you forever." "Forever," Naomi echoed, sealing the promise with another kiss. "That seems a fair exchange." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Durango, met with approval and genuine happiness from the community that had come to care for them both. Tommy, when told that Naomi would officially become his mother, had responded with such joy that both adults found themselves moved to tears. "Does this mean I can call you Ma now?" he had asked Naomi, his small face serious. "If you'd like to," Naomi had answered carefully. "Though I would never try to replace your real mother." Tommy had considered this, then nodded decisively. "My first Ma is in heaven with the angels. Pa says she watches over me. But you're here, taking care of me every day." His logic, simple and profound, had settled the matter. "So you're my Ma now, too." Christmas approached with a flurry of preparations. Matthew, working evening hours after his regular job, crafted furniture for their future home, a larger apartment above the laundry that they planned to expand into the unused attic space. Naomi sewed curtains and quilts, while Tommy contributed enthusiastically to decorations, cutting paper snowflakes and stringing popcorn garlands. The wedding was set for Christmas Eve, a decision made partly for practical reasons. The circuit preacher would be in town, and partly for the symbolism of beginning their new life together during the season of hope and renewal. As the day approached, Matthew found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point. Less than 3 months ago, he had arrived in Durango desperate and hungry, with no prospects beyond the next day's meal. Now he stood on the threshold of a new life, with steady work, a community that valued him, and a woman who loved both him and his son with a depth that humbled him daily. "You're looking mighty thoughtful for a man getting married tomorrow," Sheriff Miller commented on December 23rd as they shared a cup of coffee at the newly opened cafe. "Having second thoughts?" "Not in the slightest," Matthew assured him, "just marveling at how much can change in such a short time." The sheriff nodded sagely. "Life has a way of turning on a dime out here in the West, for better or worse." He studied Matthew over the rim of his cup. "In your case, definitely for better. You're good for Naomi." Brought the light back to her eyes. "She saved us," Matthew said simply. "Tommy and me. Not just with food and shelter, but with hope. With family." "Seems to me the saving went both ways," Miller observed. "That's how the best marriages work, from what I've seen in 40 years with Mrs. Miller." The wedding ceremony itself was simple but deeply moving. The small church overflowed with well-wishers, the pews packed with what seemed like half of Durango's population. Naomi wore a dress of deep blue velvet new, made specially for the occasion with a lace collar that had belonged to her mother. Matthew, in a new suit purchased with his savings, waited at the altar with Tommy at his side, both of them scrubbed to gleaming and solemn with the importance of the day. When Naomi walked down the aisle on Sheriff Miller's arm, the older man having volunteered to stand in for her deceased father, Matthew felt his breath catch. She looked radiant, her eyes never leaving his, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The preacher's words washed over them sacred promises of love and fidelity, commitment through hardship and joy. But for Matthew, the most powerful moment came when Tommy stepped forward during the exchange of vows. "I have something to say too," the boy announced with unexpected confidence. He pulled a carefully folded paper from his pocket and, with Naomi's help, read the words he had written. "I promise to be a good son and help with chores and learn my lessons. I promise to love my new ma and make her proud. And I promise we'll be a family forever and ever." There wasn't a dry eye in the church as Naomi knelt to embrace Tommy, whispering her own promises to him. Matthew joined them. The three of them locked in a circle of arms and shared tears and laughter. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher finally declared, his own voice thick with emotion. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration afterward filled the hotel dining room with music, food, and joyful noise. The community that had embraced them contributed to a feast that rivaled any holiday banquet: roast beef and turkey, pies of every description, cakes and cookies, and fresh bread still warm from the oven. Dancing followed the meal, with Matthew leading Naomi in their first waltz as husband and wife. Tommy, too excited to sit still, darted between tables accepting congratulations and sweets from indulgent neighbors. "Happy, Mrs. Sawyer?" Matthew asked as they moved across the floor, her hand warm in his, her waist beneath his palm feeling right and perfect. "Completely, Mr. Sawyer," she answered, her eyes shining. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He drew her slightly closer, propriety be damned. "Thank you for taking a chance on a starving drifter and his son." "Best decision I ever made," Naomi replied, rising on tiptoe to brush a kiss against his cheek. "Though I still think I got the better end of the bargain." As the evening wore on, Tommy finally succumbed to exhaustion, curling up in Mrs. Houghton's lap and falling sound asleep. The older woman waved away Matthew and Naomi's attempts to take him. "You two go on now," she insisted. "First night as husband and wife shouldn't be spent carrying a sleeping child home. Henry and I will bring him along in a bit and tuck him into bed." With grateful thanks, they slipped away from the celebration, walking arm in arm through the quiet, snow-dusted streets of Durango. Stars glittered overhead in a velvet sky, and their breath formed clouds in the crisp winter air. "It feels like a dream," Naomi confessed as they approached the laundry building their home. "After Frank died, I resigned myself to loneliness. To a life of work and duty, without love or family. And I had stopped believing we would ever find a place to belong," Matthew added, drawing her close against the cold. A home. They paused at the door, snow crunching beneath their boots. Matthew looked down at his wife, the words still new and wondrous in his mind, and felt a surge of protective love so powerful it took his breath away. "I will spend every day making sure you never know loneliness again," he promised, his voice husky with emotion. "Every day showing you and Tommy how much I love you both. And I will make certain you and Tommy never doubt that you are home," Naomi replied, reaching up to touch his face. "That you belong here, with me, always." Their kiss beneath the stars sealed these vows, promises as binding as those spoken before the preacher, as sacred as any prayer. Later that night, after the Houghtons had delivered a still sleeping Tommy to his bed, Matthew and Naomi stood in the doorway of his room, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. "He looks so peaceful," Naomi whispered. "So trusting." "He is," Matthew agreed, his arm around her waist. "And he loves you already, as if you've always been his mother." "I will be," Naomi promised, leaning into his embrace. "From this day forward, in every way that matters." As they closed Tommy's door and retreated to their own room, no longer Naomi's room, but theirs, shared in the intimacy of marriage, Matthew reflected once more on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. 3 months ago, he had been a desperate father with nothing to offer but his last meal to a kind widow. Today, he was a husband, with steady work, a home, and a future bright with promise. All because Naomi Sullivan, now Sawyer, had seen value in what little he could give and had returned that simple act of sharing with the greatest gift of all, a family, a home, forever. As winter gave way to spring, the Sawyer family flourished in Durango. The expanded apartment above the laundry became a true home, filled with the furniture Matthew crafted in evening hours and decorated with Naomi's skilled needlework. Tommy, now attending the very schoolhouse his father had helped build, thrived under the combined influence of his parents' love and guidance. The laundry business prospered as well, with Matthew's carpentry skills enabling improvements that made the work more efficient and less physically demanding. They hired 2 additional girls to help with the increased volume, allowing Naomi more time to focus on managing the business rather than the backbreaking labor of washing. By summer, they had saved enough to purchase the vacant lot adjacent to the laundry building land where Matthew planned to build a proper workshop for his growing carpentry business. Word of his skill had spread throughout Durango and surrounding areas, bringing commissions for furniture, cabinetry, and fine woodwork that commanded premium prices. "You could give up working construction entirely," Naomi suggested one evening as they sat on their newly built porch, watching Tommy play with the puppy they had adopted in the spring. "Focus solely on your own business." Matthew considered this, watching the setting sun paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Perhaps by winter," he agreed. "Houghton's been a good friend. I'd like to see the jailhouse completed before I leave his crew." Naomi nodded, understanding his loyalty. "That seems fair." She hesitated, then added with studied casualness, "Besides, it might be good to have the extra savings, what with the family expanding and all." For a moment, her words didn't register. Then Matthew turned to her, heart suddenly racing. "Naomi, are you saying?" Her smile was radiant in the fading light. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive sometime in February." Joy exploded in Matthew's chest. He gathered Naomi into his arms, laughing and crying at once. "A baby. Our baby. Tommy's going to be a big brother," Naomi said, her own eyes damp with happy tears. "I haven't told him yet. I thought we should do that together. Tonight," Matthew decided, kissing her soundly. No sense waiting to share such wonderful news. Tommy's reaction exceeded even their optimistic expectations. The boy hooped with excitement, peppering them with questions about when the baby would arrive and whether it would be a brother or sister. "Either way, you'll be a wonderful big brother," Naomi assured him, enfolding him in a warm embrace. "I'm going to teach the baby everything," Tommy declared proudly. "Reading and writing and how to throw a ball and ride a horse. All in good time," Matthew laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Babies need to learn to crawl before they can ride horses." That night, after Tommy had finally fallen asleep, his excitement making bedtime a protracted affair, Matthew and Naomi lay together in their bed, her head on his chest, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. I never thought I'd have this chance again, Naomi confessed softly. To be a mother, to carry a child. Nor I to be a father again, Matthew replied, his voice thick with emotion. After Rebecca and the baby died. I thought that door was closed forever. Naomi propped herself up on one elbow to look into his face. Are you afraid? After what happened before? Matthew considered the question honestly. Not afraid exactly. Respectful of how precious and fragile new life can be. He caressed her cheek gently. But I have faith in you. In us. In God's plan for our family. As do I. Naomi agreed, settling back against him. And Durango has a good doctor now. Dr. Wilson has delivered dozens of babies safely. We'll take every precaution, Matthew promised, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And pray for a healthy mother and child. Those prayers were answered on a cold February morning in 1880 when, after a relatively short labor, Naomi gave birth to a robust baby boy whom they named James Frank Sawyer, James for Matthew's father, Frank in honor of Naomi's first husband. He's perfect, Matthew whispered, cradling his newborn son while Tommy peered at his baby brother with wide-eyed wonder. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that work remarkably well. He's loud, Tommy observed as little James exercised those lungs with a hearty cry. But I like him anyway. Naomi laughed weakly from her bed, tired but radiant with new motherhood. He'll be quieter once he's fed and settled. And he'll need his big brother to help keep him safe and teach him all sorts of important things. Tommy nodded solemnly, accepting this responsibility with characteristic seriousness. I'll be the best big brother ever, he promised. Just like Pa is the best Pa ever. Matthew's throat tightened with emotion as he carefully transferred baby James to Naomi's waiting arms. Watching his wife cradle their son, seeing Tommy lean in close to examine the infant's tiny features, he felt a completeness he had never expected to experience. From desperation to abundance. From hunger to fulfillment. From loneliness to family. The journey had begun with a simple act of sharing a meal offered when he had nothing else to give and had led to this moment of perfect joy. What are you thinking? Naomi asked softly, noticing his contemplative expression. Matthew smiled, joining his family on the bed and gathering them all in his embrace wife, newborn, and the boy who had traveled so far with him. I'm thinking about how a single meal can feed a soul forever, he answered, when offered with kindness and received with gratitude. Naomi's eyes shone with understanding, and how love multiplies when it's shared, never diminishes. Exactly, Matthew agreed, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips. You gave us a home when we had none, a family when we were alone. And now, he looked down at baby James, pink and perfect in his mother's arms. Now our cup truly runneth over. In the years that followed, the Sawyer family continued to thrive in Durango. Matthew's carpentry business grew from a modest workshop to a respected furniture-making enterprise that employed 4 apprentices and shipped pieces as far east as Denver. Naomi expanded the laundry to include a dressmaking service that catered to Durango's increasingly prosperous population. Tommy, following in his father's footsteps, showed an early aptitude for woodworking, though his teachers noted he might also have a future in law or politics, given his articulate nature and strong sense of justice. Little James proved to be as strong-willed as his namesakes, curious and adventurous from his first steps. Durango itself grew and prospered. The arrival of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad in 1881 connecting the once isolated town to the wider world. New opportunities and challenges came with this expansion, but throughout the changes, the Sawyer home remained a center of stability, generosity, and love. On warm summer evenings, neighbors often gathered on the Sawyers' expanded porch, sharing stories and laughter as children played in the yard and fireflies danced in the gathering dusk. During these times, Matthew sometimes caught Naomi's eye across the assembled company, exchanging a private smile that acknowledged the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. From hunger to abundance. From strangers to beloved family. From a single meal shared in desperation to a lifetime of breaking bread together in joy. It was, Matthew reflected as he watched his children playing in the twilight of a perfect Colorado evening, the most valuable exchange any man could hope for. A last meal offered freely and forever given in return.